So good evening and welcome to tonight's Gold Medal Squared Motor Learning webinar. Thanks to Gold Medal Squared, gm2.com, for those of you who have not had the chance to see that great site and learn from them. The intent tonight is that you're going to realize why you should probably attend a Gold Medal Squared clinic and to just gain some of the latest research and ideas from the person that has really made the most difference in American volleyball the last bunch of years, Dr. Carl McGowan. Those of you that don't know Carl, and if you've got questions, you can type them in. Carl's been doing a little bit of volleyball for a few years. I don't know, 50? Are you over 50 years of this stuff by now?
Barely over 50, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's so half a century of knowledge, including most of the really good stuff in motor learning. For our sport, we go to Carl to get that information. Now, he's working with some great people like Doug Beal and Ron Larson and John Spera and the people at the bottom of the slide. But we urge you to go to the Gold Medal Squared, mark it, bookmark it, make it a blog that you read because some great ideas are shared there. But we've got a lot to cover. Before we do that, we're going to poll the group that's here. So I'm going to manage the poll right now, and we just want to get a sense so Carl and I can see who's here. There should be a poll coming up, and it's not like it's a test. We just want to, we're trying to figure out, are we listening to coaches or admin or boys or what? And Carl, it's coming in right now. We're at about half voted, and 90% are girls coaches, 7% are boys, and about 20% are also club directors or admin staff. We're about ready to close the poll so you guys can all see what's going on too. Again, this isn't a test or anything. We just want to see where everybody's coming from so that Carl and I can talk to people on that level. So I'm going to close the poll and let everybody see what that was. And you should be seeing that on your screen now. If it's not, let's see. Yep, share there. Should be up on your screen now, showing that 24% Carl are club directors, 90% coach girls, and 8% coach boys. 5% are also doing beach, and 8% do 11 under boys and girls. So we're going to mostly
jump in here, John, as we're looking at this poll.
Yeah, you and I don't think can see the poll because we're.
No, I can see it.
Oh, good.
I just have got a comment or two here.
Yeah, go.
We think the laws of learning are the same for boys and girls, and we think the laws of physics are the same for boys and girls. So it doesn't really matter too much to me whether we're talking to girls coaches or boys coaches, or if we're talking to youth volleyball coaches. The laws of learning, the laws of physics are the same for everybody. And also, if I'm a club director, I surely want everyone in my club, from the little kids to the big kids, to be playing volleyball the same way. So it's always made sense to us to have the 11-year-olds get taught the same kind of stuff that the 18 and unders get taught. So it's interesting to see the poll, but it doesn't change the way we feel about how you do stuff.
All right. I agree. In fact, I think one of your great articles that it's going out in the ABCA magazine recently has a wonderful sentence that I'm going to just quote here because it's not in your slideshow, and that is, in total, and this is Dr. McGowan and Dr. Bain's article, in total, the evidence on this topic is clear. Drawing distinctions between training methods based on age or ability is a coaching practice that has no foundation in either motor learning science or in the application of motor learning principles. So I agree with that one a ton. What the heck is this slide?
Yeah, are you presenting these things or am I presenting these things? We've thought from always, I think most coaches probably do, that we'd rather have facts, not opinions. And so when Steve Bain and I wrote this article, we found this on a building in London where they used to test materials, and they were doing it with facts, not opinions. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. It's a bunch of facts, not my opinions, not anybody's opinions. Just here are the facts as we know them.
All right, next slide.
And so one of the themes is you probably learned to coach by being a player. It's the most common way to learn how to coach, and so we want to change a lot of the things you do. And change is hard because a lot of the things we say aren't commonly done in the United States or anywhere for that matter in the world. So that's a problem. We have some things that are not common. And another problem is you've got some ideas that you like quite a bit, and it's very often very hard to let go of them. But the trouble is, you know, facts are these stubborn things, and whatever you wish, whatever your passions, you can't change the facts as they are. Now, we've been doing some coaching clinics for quite a long time now for Gold Medal Squared, GMS, and it turns out that we really like our record. We've got over 250 high schools that have won state championships. We've got several clubs that have won national championships. And so we like a lot what has happened, and we're not surprised because we think our methods and systems are terrific. And so we're going to tell you what we think, and you're going to do what you want with what we tell you. Change a bunch, change not at all. It's entirely up to you. But we want you to know that we did all of this with some kind of a foundation, more in science than in opinion. And coaching is complex. We all know that. So it's not news. So one of the things we've tried to do, because coaching is so complex, we've tried to make it simpler. Next slide, John. And so what we've done to make things simpler is we've said, you know, there are 5 major things we have to do as coaches. We have to decide what our practice methods are going to be like. And that has to do with our drills and our feedback and our progressions and whether it's coach-centered or player-centered, whether we're standing on a table or not standing on a table, all of the things. How are we going to warm up? What are we going to do in practice? So we have to make that decision. It's a major decision. In fact, it is the most important decision that coaches have to make. We also need to decide about our fundamental skills. How are we going to do them? We're not going to talk about that tonight, but it's something that's very important. We have to figure out how to get the kids to work hard physically, mentally, emotionally. How do we motivate them? We have to decide what systems we're going to use. We have to decide what we're going to do today. And I just would like to talk a little bit about that. What you do every day, you're going to do it with the methods that you select. What you do every day is incredibly important because we have this fundamental fact is the margins between winning and losing are incredibly small. And so we talk about a 2% rule. We'll look at that in a minute. We talk about, you know, there really aren't any little things. Everything matters. And so it turns out that we have to do the fundamentals and systems correctly. We have to do the right fundamentals and systems. We can spend a lot of time working on blocking, which I used to do, which is fun to do for me. But blocking doesn't correlate very highly with winning matches. And so if you're going to practice, you've got to do things right, and then you have to make sure you're doing the right things. And you have to do all of this with the correct methods. Because if my methods are better than your methods, I'm going to get ahead of you, and the margins are incredibly small. Next slide. And
Carl, do you want me to try and get to that?
It's kind of fun to look at, John, if you can. It takes a while here, though.
Let's see if I didn't prep, but let's see. Because I'm...
You'd have to copy that and put it on a web page.
Yeah, it's looking like I didn't set this up in time. So,
okay.
All right.
Well, I don't know. I can tell you anything now.
I'm pressing control click at the same time. It's just not, doesn't seem to want to, it's giving me a red dot for some reason. So I think that's because I'm in the PowerPoint itself. This is important stuff. So let's go to that. Oops. Let's see if I can get this guy to drop down, Carl, and I'm going to head over to it in some level.
Ooh, there's a good-looking young man.
Yeah, there's a guy that knows how to play some volleyball. That says MP3. I'm going to go. I think I can paste it this way, like you said. And sorry I didn't cue this up for you here earlier, but yeah, there's a nice email from Floyd. All right. All right. Is it in there?
Yeah, there it goes.
Okay.
So here we have what they're calling an Olympic musical. It's a graphic representation of the skiers as they came across the finish line. And so we see, for example, in men's downhill, the winning time was 1:54.31. And then all of these skiers came in. There are 4 skiers that came in within 0.25 hundredths of a second of the winner. And so you can get over there on the left where it says play, and we can hear the finishers. Yeah, we can't hear though, huh? Oh, there it is. Now, the women's downhill was a little bit more spread out, but the men's downhill, look at the incredible, and here's the men's Super G. And we got the women's giant slalom, and then there are some more races that were going on besides just skiing. There was some speed skating. Look at the speed skating things. The women's 10,000 meter. And there's the men's 500 meter. It looks like, listen to this. And on and on. And so if you're a skier in the Olympic Games, you've just spent 4 years of your life training for this, and you're going to be hundredths of a second behind the gold medalists, and you're not going to get anything. And so hundredths of a second count. And it turns out that they count in volleyball as well. Because in the Olympic Games, in a 4-game match, there will be approximately 185 serves. And that means we have 185 chances to have our hand exactly where it needs to be when we serve. And we can be a tenth of a second behind or a tenth of a second too soon. And one serve is going to go out of bounds and one serve is going to go in the net. And then there's passing. We can be there or we can be a tenth of a second late, and it's the difference between an ace and a perfect pass. And on and on and on. There are hundreds of opportunities in a volleyball match to be just right or not just right. And so our game, we're keeping these big scores, 25, 23, but there are hundreds of plays that are all about milliseconds that make a difference in winning and losing a match. And it's just really important for us to know how tiny the margins are. And then we have this side-out efficiencies. Way back in the 1990s, Gil Fellingham, who is a PhD in biostatistics at BYU, figured side-out efficiencies and expected wins and losses. And what he said is this: if our team can side out at 50%, and our opponents can side out at 50%, and if we play 30 matches against an opponent that can do that, and we do that, we're probably going to win half our matches. And that makes a lot of sense. You know, we would win 15 and we would lose 15. There might be some variability, but the most likely outcome is 15 and 15. Now, the surprising thing is if we can get to be 51% better at siding out, or if we can get to be 1% better at siding out and side out at 51%, and if we can get better on defense and hold our opponents to 49%, we are now 2% better than our opponents. Not so much. And if we play those 30 matches, it turns out that the predicted winning percent is 64%. And that's a stunning increase. You know, it's not 51% now that we're going to win, or 52%. We're going to win 64% of our matches if we just happen to be 2% better than our opponents. And so instead of 15 and 15, we end up almost 20 and 10, almost winning 2 out of every 3 of our matches. Pretty good career if you can go 20 and 10 for your lifetime. And then if you get 4%, the expected winning percent goes from 64 to 74%. And then if you get to be 6%, it goes to 82%, and then it goes to 94% if you're 10% better. And if you're 20% better, you're going to win virtually all of your matches. You're going to win 99%. Now, Gil Fellingham told me this when I was first starting to coach at BYU. He told me this in 1989, actually, is when he did this study. These are the predictions that he made based on statistical analysis. And we believed him. And we were playing games to 15 then. We were not rally scoring. And so what Gil said turned out to be true with regular scoring games. I don't know if it's regular scoring. It's regular for me. When you're an old guy, you play games to 15. Now we play rally scoring. And we have some side-out efficiencies and wins and losses at the University of Washington that are from the year 2002, 3, 4, and 5. They are rally scoring matches now. And here's the University of Washington in 2002. They were 2% better than their opponents. They played 31 matches. The expected winning percent was 64%. And, geez, we should have had these numbers up there, John. You know what?
Just verbalize them.
I've got them right here in my manila folder. So just, you weren't prepared, and now I'm not prepared, and we're screwing up this presentation right here.
I don't think so.
And so Washington played 31 matches, and now I need my glasses, in 2002, and they went 20 and 11. And I don't know, does anybody have a calculator? What's 0.64 times 3.1? It's very close to 20 and 11. And in 2003, they were at 64% siding out and holding their opponents to 60. They played 32 matches. They're supposed to win 74% of those matches. They're supposed to win I don't know how many they're supposed to win, but I can tell you that they went in 2003. They went, where is it? They went 23 and 9. And I think they're supposed to win 24 and 8 or something like that. And if we do it again in 2004, they're supposed to win 94, and they come within one match of doing that. And then in 2005, they won the national championship. They're 20% better than their opponents. They're going to win a lot of matches if you're 20% better than your opponents. And in 2005, they win 30-1, I believe, and won the national championship. And so we're belaboring the point, I think. But the point is the differences between winning and losing are incredibly small, incredibly small. And so Bill Walsh, who is maybe a football coach that we knew, he coached the San Francisco 49ers, and Joe Montana was his quarterback. Recently, he wrote a book about the score takes care of itself. It's a nice book to read. And in this book, there's a portrait of Bill Walsh by Joe Montana. And Joe Montana says, here's Walsh's standard. He wanted perfection. And it makes sense to want perfection if you realize that the differences between winning and losing are so incredibly small. And so one of the things that Walsh fought for was perfection. But here's the thing that was best of all, I think, about Walsh. And it says, he taught us to want to be perfect and instilled in the team a hunger for improvement, a drive to get better and better. And so that's the best trait maybe that Walsh had. He got it so that his players wanted to be perfect. And if we could get it so that all of the players on our team wanted to be perfect, if all of the players on all of our teams wanted to be perfect, that would be really something special. And let's get rid of that slide. We won't talk about that slide. And so the question then for me becomes this question. Where did all of us get our coaching methods? Where did you coaches out there get your coaching methods? Where did I get my coaching methods? And it turns out that if we do some poll with that, we find out that almost everybody learned to coach by being coached. We coached the way we were coached. John, I saw some figures you had on that once. Do you remember any of those numbers that you had?
Yeah, it's not coming back, but it's a pretty high number in the case of probably about 92% is what I'm remembering.
Yeah, so that's where we learned to coach, from the way we were coached. But the trouble with that is most coaches don't really know for sure if what they're doing is correct. They've just copied this and copied that, and maybe they've won some matches, so they figure it's okay. And so this is a really important question for all of us. Where should we get our coaching methods? I know where we got them. We got them from being coached. But the question is, where should we get them? And so I think it's the most important question that we have to answer as coaches. And here's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wasn't talking to us about coaching volleyball for sure, but he says, the person who knows how will always have a job, but the person who knows why will always be the boss. And then he says, as to methods, there may be 1 million and then some, and probably there are more, but there are only a few principles. And if a person knows principles, they can successfully select methods. And however, the person who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble. They're going to have some good methods and they're going to have some bad methods, but they're going to get behind because the margins are so very small. And then D. Hawk, who put VISA together, he says, simple, clear principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. I love that. Simple, clear principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. And if we do it the other way, if we have complex methods, complex rules and regulations, we're going to have simple and stupid behavior. So if we want to build a great volleyball program, we better make sure that we have the right principles in place. And so then another question is, where should we get our principles? And we define here principles, just in case we wonder what we're talking about. Stephen Covey, who wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, good book to read. He says, here's what principles are. They are underlying laws that govern behavior. That's where they come from. They also can come from rules or statistical trends. And therefore, from these underlying laws and these rules or statistical trends, we develop statements of what should or should not be done. And here's what principles aren't. They aren't ideas based on people or things which are subject to frequent and immediate change. And they don't depend on the behavior of others, or they are not the current fad. And in my opinion, especially in women's volleyball in the United States, there have been a whole bunch of methods that have been espoused by people who are trying to get the current fad in place. I think it's hurt our ability to play internationally, to have that in our, especially women's volleyball. So next slide. John Wooden, who is a famous basketball coach, maybe not all of us know John Wooden, but he coached basketball at UCLA and is considered the best basketball coach ever, maybe the best coach ever. He said, when I was coaching, I always considered myself a teacher. Teachers follow the laws of learning, and so he's starting to talk about something now, laws of learning, not opinions of learning, but laws of learning. And so he says a coach is a teacher, and I used to encourage anyone who wanted to coach to get a degree in teaching so they could find out about the laws of learning and apply them to athletics. And then there's an article here by Erickson that has generated a lot of popular books recently. He wrote it in 1993. He said this: a number of conditions for optimal learning and improvement of motor learning performance have been uncovered. We know a number of conditions for optimal learning and improvement of performance have been uncovered. And so John Wooden wants us to know about the laws of learning. Erickson says we know them. They've been uncovered. And so if I'm a coach, I ask this question all the time. What are they? What are the laws of learning? And so because of our incomplete knowledge of practice variables, we are often inefficient in our practice sessions. My guess is we're more often inefficient than we are efficient. Thus, there is a limited opportunity for practice, coupled with small gains in expertise resulting from each session. Gee whiz, we're not so good, we're going to get small gains. This increases dramatically the importance of maximizing the benefits gained whenever practice is undertaken. And for over a century, we've been working on this, studying this, and it turns out that we know how to have good practices. And so, coaches, where should we get these principles? Turns out that we get them from science. We ask them, what are the laws of learning? Did you study them scientifically? Are they your opinion, or are they facts? And research has shown that if we find out what the laws of learning are, and if we use them, we get to be better as coaches. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look real fast. Here's a model. One thing I want to look at is the top thing right there. It says, here's what athletes do. They select goals. They formulate motor programs. They make responses. They process feedback. Based on the response, they're probably going to want to make some changes, and they're going to do it again, and they're going to keep doing it for the rest of their lives. They're going to be in this little loop doing these kinds of things. Coaches have to do these things to help them by presenting goals, help them with motor program development, stage 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can see, give feedback in stage 4, and look at all the research that says, do it this way. No opinions, just facts. So go, John. We don't have time for a motor learning class. Unfortunately, we don't get to spend 16 weeks, an hour a day. So we're going to go in 30 minutes. We're going to do this class, maybe less. Here are the three main things. You've got to be able to present information to your players. You've got to help them develop efficient movement patterns. And you've got to be really good at giving them feedback. So we're going to talk just a little bit about those three areas. We're going to go really fast with this goal presentation because it's pretty straightforward. We have this important concept. Our learners have a limited ability to process information. So once we say that, once we say our learners have a limited ability to process information, that means, I think it means that we should find out how to demonstrate what we want them to know, what we want them to do. Where are you going here? All right, so demonstrations are an important part of giving information to our athletes. And it turns out the movement information is retained in memory in the form of an image. So it makes sense to give the information in the form of an image. And research has been done that shows most tasks are learned at a faster rate when repeated demonstrations are shown. And Galloway, once upon a time, way back when, wrote a really good book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and he said this: I was beginning to learn what all good teachers must learn, that images are better than words, images are better than words, showing better than telling, and too much instruction is worse than no instruction at all. So we're going to demonstrate. The trouble with demonstration, you keep going the wrong way, John. The trouble with demonstrations is that kids don't always pay attention to the right things. And there are a bunch of things we want them to see. And so we have to organize some keys. And keys are really important. We don't have time to talk about all of the reasons, but if you would look 1, 2, 3, the fourth reason, they encourage coaches to attend to important elements of this skill. And so coaches, if you're going to put keys together, you really got to think about, I don't get to say a lot of things to my athletes. What's really important? What do I really want to say to them to help them learn this skill? And I can't say 25 things. I'm only going to get to say 3, 4, or 5 things. So I really got to pay attention. What do I want to say? And in what order do I want to say it? And so a very important part of coaching is selecting the right keys and getting them in the right order. And if I do a better job than you, or if you do a better job than I, then you get ahead and I get behind. And so we have to have this teaching method where we demonstrate the skill and have them focus on a key and then give them feedback about the key. And we go through teaching the skill one key at a time, feedback about this key, practice on this key, feedback about that key, practice on that key. And in fact, there will be a demonstration, and then we will practice with focus on the key. And we're going to do that until all the keys have been uncovered or have been covered. Now, there's this thing called a motor program. For me, this is the most important part of the model. I've got to formulate a motor program. Don't go, John. Yeah, right there. No, you went the wrong way again.
Yeah. I keep hitting the keys by mistake, sorry.
I've got to organize a motor program, and motor learning experts believe that the motor program is a type of central representation, an image in the mind that controls actions and movements. And so it turns out that we play volleyball with our motor programs, with our minds, if you would. We don't really play with we play with our bodies, I suppose, but our bodies are getting told what to do. And so we could say that we do forearm passing with a motor program, not with our forearms. That we do serving with a motor program, not with our hand. We play volleyball with motor programs. And so it's obvious that making certain that athletes develop effective motor programs is one of the most important tasks facing coaches. So I like to ask, what are motor programs like, and how can we best teach them? And so along the way to that, we've got all these people saying these things. Here's Bruce, Bryce. He's saying the mind is the athlete. The body is simply the means it uses. And Daniel Coyle, who wrote a really interesting book recently, The Talent Code, he says skills are really circuits in your brain. And there's more. We have some research on skill acquisition suggests that training over time leads to reorganization of the primary motor cortex, changing its functional organization and excitability. And there's motor map reorganization, and there's generation of new synapses, and the brain changes when skill is developed. And there's other research done at Oxford that found out the same thing. Here are some people learning to juggle. What we found out is that after they've learned to juggle, there's new white matter, and there's new gray matter, and there are all of these changes going on in the brain. And so it's very clear that people change what's going on in the central nervous system in the brain when they learn a motor skill. So motor programs are these central images that help us move and play volleyball. And I might add that there are changes that happen with the body as well. Muscle fiber type can change. Heart volume can change. All kinds of changes can happen in the body as well. But the changes in the central nervous system are going to drive all of these changes with the body. So Franklin Henry, in 1958, said this. The question is, are motor programs specific? That is to say, we can only use them in little tiny places, or are they general? Can we use them all over the place? Can we play pepper and learn to dig playing pepper and use pepper to teach us how to dig hard-driven spikes? You know, is digging some general thing, or is digging some more specific thing? Is serving something that I could use to play tennis with and throw javelins with and throw footballs with, or is serving this very specific thing? And so that's the main question. And if we can go back to the other slide, John. Henry said this way long time ago, 50 years ago. It is no longer possible to justify the concept of unitary. We could put in there general abilities, such as coordination and agility, since the evidence shows that these abilities are specific to the task or activity. And if I could say one thing to coaches throughout the world, I would say to them, you don't know how specific motor programs are. It's the most important thing you know as coaches. If you know that motor programs are incredibly specific, you know the most important thing. Excuse me. You know the most important thing that there is to know about coaching. That motor programs are specific.
And I'm going to add here, Carl, while you clear your voice. We had Schmidt and Erickson both come to the OTC a couple of years back with about 38 different other Olympic sports coaches. And from Thursday through Sunday morning, by the time they left, they must have said specificity in training in that room 3,000 to 4,000 times until people finally started to get it. And people would ask, they'd say, well, what if I did this? And it would be kind of something non-specific. And Schmidt would answer it on a more random versus block level. He'd say, well, are you training for practice? Or are you training for performance? Whereas Erickson and everybody else, as things went on, started going, like they were showing the Russian leaper where the rubber bands are, and they tie them around your waist, and they were saying, is this something that's going to be helping you be a better block jumper or whatever? And in every other Olympic sport, in their motor program leader that might have been there, they look at this thing and they go, no, it's not specific to what you're trying to do as a blocker. And, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing. I think I would agree with you, Carl, 1,000%, that you just don't realize how specific motor programs are. Of course, you're going to point out some more points on that.
All right, if we understand this, if we believe it, that motor programs are incredibly specific, then we actually know a lot of answers to other research that has been done. So, for example, there's been a lot of research done. Well, here's this, by Proto. He says that these specificity effects get to be larger the more highly practiced the skills are. So that's who we're dealing with a lot of the time, as highly practiced athletes. And the more practiced, the larger specificity becomes as opposed to the smaller. So I'm interested in knowing that. So there you are. And here's one by Clawens, who is a neurologist. He wrote a book, Why Michael Couldn't Hit. It's about Michael Jordan. And he says this: hitting a baseball is a visual motor skill. It would be easy for us to say that passing a volleyball is a visual motor skill. That is about recognizing where a volleyball is going to be at a particular instant of time and then getting your forearms there. So he says hitting a stationary ball resting on an elongated tee does not in any way prepare one to see and hit a baseball. And of course, there are thousands of t-ball games that happen every summer. But he says this: hitting a stationary ball resting on an elongated tee does not in any way prepare one to see and hit a baseball. They are far different neurological processes. That is to say, they are different motor programs. They are not the same skill at all. Now, we can paraphrase that any way we want in volleyball. Hitting a ball out of a spiket does not in any way prepare one to spike a volleyball. Hitting a ball against a wall does not in any way prepare one to spike a volleyball. Playing pepper does not in any way prepare one to dig hard-driven spikes. They are different neurological processes. They are not the same skills at all. Motor programs are incredibly specific. And so it's not surprising that here's some study that was done by Atkins, Boychuk, Rimple, and Klein in 2006. These data indicate that training on a novel skill produces alteration in the neural circuitry in the motor cortex that are specific to the muscle groups necessary for execution of the trained task. And they don't occur following other kind of repetitive use of these same muscle groups. So it's not surprising when we read these kind of experiments. Well, of course, what else could be? And then the transfer research, a lot of research here. Schmidt says, guess what? The amount of motor transfer is quite small unless you do it exactly the way you're really going to do it. Then you get transfer. So Schmidt's saying, guess what? Motor programs are specific. There isn't going to be transfer. And then we got a bunch of other stuff. There's these whole part studies. We wrote an article. There was an article in the AVCA journal recently that said, we really like part practice in our gym. So Steve Bain and I wrote an article that said that's too bad because it's not so good. And it turns out that there's never been a study, not once ever, in the hundreds of studies that have been done, where part practice was better than whole practice. And there's this issue of, and so that's another way of saying, look how specific things are. Hitting a ball against a wall, hitting a ball out of a spiket, none of those things help you get better at spiking volleyballs. You've got to run and jump and spike from the very beginning with some kind of focus on cues. Motor programs are state dependent. That means the environment gets to be part of them. It means emotion gets to be part of them. And other things can become part of these motor programs. They're incredibly specific. And then Dick Schmidt, he likes to talk about random versus block practice. John, you ought to tell us here what he says. You're way more familiar with the work that he's done with you guys recently. So tell us about random versus block practice.
Well, and before that, I just wanted to make sure everybody knows, A, you can ask questions, although we will have after Carl's done, an opportunity, if Carl, you can stay with us to answer questions. But your whole versus part article is already up on your website, and we'll be making sure that it's goldmedalsquared.com, and you can go there to find the article and download it so that you can have 14 more pages of great writing and quoting and research that we won't have time to cover here. The random versus block practice research is kind of fascinating, because when we do things in blocked, repetitively passing from one place or variations on a theme versus the way the game is played, we like to think that it's better. But as Schmidt kept saying to the people that would try and press him to say, I think we need to do this in a row like this, he would say, yeah, if you're trying to look good in practice. But the retention of those who train blocked is vastly inferior to those who are trained randomly. And the ability to problem solve novel situations when you're trained randomly is superior to those that are trained in a much more blocked way. And, he's making a lot of money right now working with the PGA in golf, because the tradition, like in our volleyball, the tradition of golfers is to go to the driving range and they pick up the driver, and what do? You wallop it 20 to 30 times until it feels good or whatever. And then you pick up another club and you do that one a whole bunch of time. And he says then people go to the golf course and their handicap hasn't changed because they're doing these things in such a blocked way. So he's getting good money to convince the PGA people to help people understand that you should hit the driver, because in the game you hit the driver on the first tee maybe. How long until you hit it again? Yeah, maybe 3 more holes, unless you do like I do and slice it out of bounds, and hey, then you get to hit it again. But that's not the goal in golf for sure. So random training promotes superior retention, and problem solving is the key thing for tonight's session to help you understand.
And random is specific to the game, of course.
Yeah. I think Rob said it a couple of years ago, Browning. He goes, I would argue pretty strongly that no point played in volleyball is ever identical to any point ever played again. And he's right. That's how random our game is.
Yeah. Millions, huh? Like snowflakes, I guess. Yeah. So what all of this means is we've got a lot of different lines of evidence. We looked at 5 converging lines of evidence, and they all say the same thing. There is incredible specificity here. And so this convergence makes the recommended applications very compelling. And I see 2 places where it's easy to apply. We need to talk about our progressions, and we need to talk about our drills. And so if we were talking about progressions, we would say, well, we don't want very many because we want to get to the real game as soon as we can. And the ones that are used should be as much like the game of volleyball as possible. But we need to make them appropriate for skill. For the skill of our learners. And in that article that's on our webpage that John mentioned, there's a really good discussion of this, better than we can do here, I think. But if I'm a beginner just learning how to spike, the hard part for a beginner learning how to spike is that the ball goes up and down. So I need to have a ball going up and down, and I need to run and jump and hit it. But I don't need a block, because that's too hard for me right now. That's too advanced. At some point, the ball goes up and down, and I can deal with that, and now I need a block. That's appropriate for me because I'm a skilled spiker. And if I want to learn how to pass, I don't want Clay Stanley hitting 70-mile-an-hour spike serves at me. It's okay to have some little simple tosses. That would be appropriate. But someday it's appropriate to have Clay Stanley come and hit spike serves at me. And that's one of the reasons why the USA did win a gold medal almost immediately after leaving altitude, because now they could serve and pass like it really is everywhere, not like it is at Colorado Springs at 6,600 feet or whatever it is.
And
so we need these. Yeah.
I would add that, one of the things we forget sometimes, maybe in haste, antenna are regulatory stimuli when you play. And you're going to want to make sure that you always have antenna up. And if you're going to be playing, practicing without them, I think you're doing a disservice to your kids. The other one that I think, Carl, is really important for our coaches in America to get better at, when we play the game, the ball has a certain pressure that good officials inflate it to and put the ball out on the court with that right pressure. But I go to gyms everywhere in the world, and that bucket of balls has balls that probably vary in pressure by about, 2 pounds across the board. You got the soft ones and the overly hard ones and the ones that are right. And I don't think it's fair to teach your kids how to serve and pass and things when the balls are so incredibly ungame-like, what their reality will be when they play. That's not fair to the kids.
Yeah. I remember us doing that in Arizona when we were there.
Right.
Let's get these balls filled up, yeah. All right, where are we? We're in trouble for time here.
No, we're not.
Okay. Here's some work from Erickson. He's got a really good idea here, I think. So let's look at it a little bit. How about an amateur tennis player who is a baseliner, maybe? He likes to play from the baseline, but somehow he finds himself up at the net, and he misses a volley. And maybe later on he'll come to the net again, and wow, here it is again. And maybe there'll be 2 of those things in the match. And so he's no good at all at hitting a volley at the net. And if we're only going to play to learn how to hit that volley, we're not going to get very many reps. So Erickson says, contrast this type of learning with a session where a tennis coach or a volleyball coach would set up situations where we would do a lot of something. Maybe we would, I'm thinking of a ball that I'm going to spike into the deep corner. And so maybe I'm just going to have set up a deal where we spike into the deep corner, spike into the deep corner, spike into the deep corner, kind of get a feel for that. And I'm going to do this for a while. Here he says the coach is going to set up situations where the player would stand at the net and be ready to execute the volley. With mastery of the easy volleys, a coach can increase the difficulty of the shots and eventually go play tennis. Embed volley shots into the rallies. And this is then, of course, when we are starting to play volleyball, and we're going to do the shots that we really do. It is easy to see how a few hours of this type of training would improve a player's volley more than 100 hours of regular tennis play because I only get 2 or 3 reps. And so I like to think of that concept of I'm going to do this for a while, not forever, but just for a while until I get the general idea, and then I'm going to go play volleyball. And so it's kind of like what Schmidt says here. How long can we do this blocked practice that Erickson is wanting us to do? Well, Schmidt says, I don't know of very many studies where we ask, how long do we get to stay with block before we do random? Because I know that for a long time when I was teaching people how to do stuff, I was in a little bit of a block format for a while. And so Schmidt says, I would summarize these results in my own view like this. Block practice is better for retention. That's what you were talking about, John, retention. Only for beginners. And a beginner can be an advanced player that hasn't done this particular spike to this place before. So beginners are not just people that have never played volleyball. Sometimes if you're wanting somebody to learn a shot they haven't learned, even though they've been playing for 5 years, they're still beginners at this shot. So block practice is better for retention only for beginners. And then these findings seem to suggest that block practice is effective. Now, I can't read this. Until the learner can just barely do it, and that random practice is always more beneficial thereafter. So the point here is it's okay to have some blocked practice until I just kind of have the general idea, and then I got to go get involved in let's play volleyball, random practice, if I really want to have the optimum amount of learning. And so we don't need to read this slide. Let's go on to the next slide, John. And so we can see now what drills have to be like. We have to learn to play volleyball by playing volleyball. Doesn't mean we can't get in a drill where we're working on passing. Doesn't mean we can't get in a drill where we're working on spiking. Doesn't mean that we can't have all kinds of drills. It's just that they better be like the game. When drills are developed, the teacher should carefully consider the way skills are performed in a game to determine that the drills are as close to the game as possible. Here's a picture that Sean Olmstead, a volleyball coach at BYU, took when he was in Brazil. And Brazilians do this a lot. And of course, the Brazilians can really play. They get up on benches and hit balls at their players. They do it a lot. I had a player on my team, my BYU team, a while ago when I was coaching, Fernando Pessoa. He went to the Final Four 3 times, and he won 2 national championships. And he told me at the end of his career, he said, Carl, if Brazil ever learns to practice the way America practices with the athletes that they have as compared to the athletes that you have, you're never going to win another match against Brazil. And he loved the way we practice, but he was saying something that's very true. There are just an unlimited supply of volleyball players in Brazil. And so back up a little bit, John, here. So I think you could do this in your practice. If you want to stand on some tables right here, do it in the very beginning. But if this gets to be an important part of your training after they know what to do, after they have been completely schooled, then you're going to get the same message that Fernando Pessoa gave me. If Brazil ever learns how to practice like the USA knows how to practice, your USA is never going to win another match. So this is okay if you're in the beginning. We don't think it's okay if you're not in the beginning like Brazil uses it. Finally, do we have, John, it's an hour has passed. What do we got? 3 minutes left here?
The chance to listen to you will go as long as you're able to yak at us.
Okay, or until they leave us, I guess. So the third item, it says here, the first item is we got to have keys, and we got to have demonstrations, and we have to use them properly. And the second item is we have to know how incredibly specific motor programs are. And then we're going to talk about this third item. And the third item is information feedback. And it says here, it's generally viewed as the most important variable. Oh, wait, except for game-like practice itself. And so here's a statistical, scientific fact. There have been a number of studies that have shown that the number of times a player practices a skill at an appropriate level of difficulty, appropriate regulatory stimuli, this is the best predictor of their improvement. So Erickson is now talking about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice as the most important variable in determining how expert you're going to get to be. And there have been a lot of books. Coyle's is one of them. Gladwell's is another one. Schenk's is another one. All of these books about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Well, it says here, there have been a lot of studies, including Erickson's, that have shown that the number of times a player practices a skill is the best predictor of their improvement. So coaches should do everything they can to make sure that the number of practice trials or the number of opportunities to respond is maximized. And they need to make sure that there's really great feedback while we're getting all of those practice trials. So information feedback is generally viewed as the most important variable. Information feedback. But it turns out that the most important variable is how many game-like reps did we get. So this is a very powerful sentence right here. The most important variable. The second most important variable. There they are. How many reps? How good is your feedback? So, next slide. So here are 5 main ways to increase opportunities to respond, to increase repetitions. One of them is we have to decide how we're going to warm up. I have a lot of college coaches that I know that are off recruiting. They're recruiting in clubs primarily, and they're also recruiting in high schools. One of them has told me that when he goes in the gym, he turns on his stopwatch when the coach comes in, and that it's usually about 45 minutes before the players get a ball and start playing volleyball. And all the other time was taken in talking and running around the gym and stretching. And that's how people warm up in the United States. They run around and do all these funny movement patterns, and then they stretch. And we have a study here that was published in the Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, and they reviewed 361 other studies. So here's a bunch of facts right here. They concluded that there was no evidence that stretching before or after exercise prevented injury or muscle soreness. So I didn't say don't warm up. I just said don't stretch. And don't use funky little things to do warm-up either. Get a ball out and start playing over the net. Start playing short court. Start doing something with a volleyball and a net, and get that as part of our warm-up activity.
You know, Carl, Scotty Bowman had a great observation, the ice hockey coach, that Americans, when they go on the ice, they skate in circles. Europeans, when they hit the ice, they throw out a bag of pucks and they stick handle as they skate in circles. When he was asked why are Europeans better stick handlers, and I think that applies to volleyball as well.
Yeah, same deal, huh? Exactly the same deal. So, coaches, here's a way to get a lot more opportunities to respond. If you're in a 2-hour practice in club where courts are expensive, you got to get going. And if you spend 20 minutes warming up, you've just spent an incredibly large amount of time on something that in no way will transfer to you getting to be a better player. And we've already said how incredibly small the margins are, incredibly small. And if you spend 20 minutes running around and stretching, and I play volleyball, I'm going to get ahead of you. And I'm going to win all of the close matches, or at least enough of them to win the matches, because I'm going to get 1 or 2% better, and we know how small the margins are. We're going to do some tutoring, and we're going to do small groups. That's why I really like to have 2 courts, 16 players. And if I'm a high school coach, I can organize this with a little bit of creative thinking. If I'm a club coach, I can get my 16 ones and 16 twos practicing together, maybe 16 kids, 2 courts. There are lots of ways I can get involved in small group activities. Bill Neville and Doug Beal invented Walsh games for us, where we toss in balls, and I really like a whiteboard. Whiteboard is incredibly valuable for saving time and getting reps and providing feedback and helping us remember keys and doing just all kinds of stuff that's very important for learning. And so
Carl,
let's look at. Yeah.
I think, Carl, one of the I'm pretty sure the study came from you and BYU, that in a scrimmage, if scrimmage is baseline, that 2-ball wash drills increase the contacts per hour by 20 or so %, and 3-ball wash scoring scrimmages increase the contacts per hour by 25 or so %. Does that ring bells?
Yeah.
And those are big numbers.
And if I get a ball and a partner, and if there are 12 of us with a ball and a partner, so that's 6 balls, 12 of us, and we're hitting the ball back and forth for 15 minutes, there will be over 1,000 repetitions in that environment right there. So we're talking about a lot of opportunities to respond right here. And they all carry some feedback because the ball goes, according to the angles that we put on it, and so the laws of physics provide a lot of feedback for us. So yeah, all of that stuff. Here's what Gino Auriemma says about stretching. It's the biggest waste of time in the history of sports. Gino Auriemma is the coach at Connecticut. They're in the process now of winning 80-some basketball games in a row, getting a lot more press from that than Russ Rose got for winning 100-and-some volleyball matches in a row. But anyhow, Gino says, stretching before practice is the biggest waste of time in the history of sports. Yet, he's a wuss. He gives his players 10 minutes to stretch so they can all sit around and talk about what movies they saw, what pair of shoes they saw in some store. If I'm going to give my players 10 minutes to stretch, it's after practice is over. Go talk about all that stuff you want to do, but not before, not during. He says, I stay in my office until they're done. It's nauseating. And next slide, and then the next slide. One more. Here's a whiteboard. Your whiteboard should look something like this. It's got stuff on the left for pre-practice activities. It's got sayings on the right. It's got drills. It's got every kind of thing for practice. This is from the University of Washington. And then the next slide is the other half of practice on the back of the whiteboard at the University of Washington. That's what it takes to put a practice together at the University of Washington. And you can imagine that it took a while to organize this. You can't just go throw this on the board and expect to be coaching. And then we have one more slide, I guess. Who is this guy? I'm one of those people who can't explain things without a whiteboard. And that's the way it works sometimes. When you get so that you've been using a whiteboard for a while, you absolutely cannot coach without one. All right, we're done. We're way past time.
It's not just the whiteboard in the gym. I guess because if we go back to Wooden's concept of we're teachers, I can't think of a single classroom I go into for the last 40 years that there isn't a white or a chalkboard in there so that the teacher can do their practice objectives and put them up on the board and do things that way. Not that we're getting more technological and we're doing it with computers, but still there's a whiteboard or something to draw and write on. And yet I go into gyms around the world and there's not a single whiteboard, and you just go, what? So, because we want to be better teachers. All right, well, here's the deal. There's the team that Carl helped win another gold medal with, because he's been part of all of the ones that we've won, bronze or gold. Our sitting team and our other teams. The Misty and Carrie show over there were coached by a guy that played for Carl, Troy, who got the benefit of knowing this stuff from years of playing there.
I wish Troy would have played for me. Troy coached with me.
Well, he coached with you. Sorry. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so by coaching with you, that's a pretty nice advantage. And everybody, if you need continuing education modules, you can go to this link, and you see this on the website to get this for this course, but it's not certainly in no way mandatory, because if you don't need it, you don't need it. It was such valuable stuff, we wanted to make sure that you could get credit for being here. So that leads us to Q&A time, and I'm going to start with first off, Carl, a thank you from Mike Vincent, who had to leave. He said, I have to leave. Please extend my profound thanks to Dr. McGowan for his time and the information shared this evening. Compelling, to say the least. And and I agree. But we're going to with Bill Howard. And I like this question a lot. And if you have questions, type them into the question box, and Carl and I will just kind of hang out here until we're done. But Bill writes, is there ever a time to break down a motor learning skill to focus on breaking a bad habit? Example, have a player hit a ball out of a spike it in order to see how high they can or actually should reach. Example, with a player who is late and drops their elbow all the time.
Well, you're going to answer this, John, because you were just in a room with Dick Schmidt, who told me, and coaches kept asking these kinds of questions. So here's that kind of question.
Well, so Bill, I guess there's two things to get big picture. One is that we need to get better at not teaching the contact, but everything that leads up to the contact. So when a player hits the ball low, you're right that they're late, but the answer isn't to tell them like so many coaches do, reach, extend, let's see the big five, reach, extend, get on top of the ball, get your elbow up, or don't drop your elbow, say the negative coaches. The answer is to first check for understanding, because the kid and you may not be on the same page. So you say, show me without the ball what I mean by hitting with reach or whatever. And if they show you without the ball that they can do it technically without any timing matters, that they've got a full reach, they know what they're supposed to do, but they're hitting it down low. So that athlete simply needs to go sooner or faster or both with your guidance and their thinking about it. And the ball will then be where? And the answer is higher. And then they will reach. They might even reach or go so soon that when they reach as high as they can, they whiff it because they've mistimed it by another few milliseconds the other way. But that means that they're working on changing their timing of their approach, which is totally in one person's control. You can't, because of human reaction time, you can't say go now or push them or anything. They have to figure out off of real volleyball sets, not coaches' throws, how they timed their hit to that set to hit it at full extension. And the only way you do it is by doing it a lot.
And let me add that motor programs, these sets of stored commands up there in the white matter and the gray matter and all of the things that we looked at, motor programs are holistic things. They aren't parts, they're wholes. And so a spike is composed of an approach and an arm swing to a double arm lift to help you jump, and then you swing at the ball. And that is a holistic event right there. And learning how to do part of it, just the arm swing, in no way transfers to learning how to do all of it. And so before I knew some of this stuff, I remember spending a lot of time with Dylan Duncan, hitting a ball out of a spike it, hitting a ball out of a spike it, hitting a ball out of a spike it. We spent hours at the beginning of practice with Dylan Duncan hitting a ball out of a spike it, and we'd get it. She'd be pretty good out of a spike it. Ooh, Dylan, nice going. You're getting it. You're getting your elbow up. You're hitting it high, and we'd get all excited. And then she would go spike in practice, and the very first spike would be back to the same crummy elbow down thing that she was doing before. So I've got a lot of hours working with Dylan trying to fix her in a bad environment where she never got fixed, and we wasted a bunch of time. And so what you have to do is you have to have them run and jump and hit a ball and give them feedback and get some video of them and ask them how it felt and ask them what they're supposed to do and all the things that you're going to have to go through to break these kind of habits.
Now, to further that, it is clearly harder to time a ball that's falling from really high outside because it kind of rips through the hitting zone pretty quick than it is a ball that would be like, say, a meter ball or something that kind of, a ball that's about a meter high above the net. So we've got, I think, the timing training wrong, where we get young kids and we set these super high balls where if you set a meter ball and then a little bit higher ball, and ultimately, because even the meter balls are going to be varied and random and all over the place, a beginner can hit a meter ball much sooner with full reach timing than a high outside. But high outsides occur even at the lower levels, so they have to experience some of those too. Got another question here from Chan, Carl. I tell my players we don't do static stretches before practices, tournaments, because I've never seen a child stop to stretch before recess. Yet they give 100%. But I do dynamic stretching real quickly to, quote, get the blood flowing. Should I just bag it?
Well, there is no evidence that any kind of stretching helps you be a better volleyball player. And it takes time. And what helps you be a better volleyball player is how many game-like repetitions do you get. So, I don't know. For me, the answer is pretty clear. It's not helping me be a better volleyball player, and it's not helping me keep from getting injured. Why am I doing it?
Well, you know the answer to that. It's the song Tradition, right?
Yeah, Tradition, yeah, there he is.
Any other questions? Because we're looking at the other ones I'm seeing, I've kind of answered so that Carl could address some of these larger ones. Everybody's saying, of course, Carl, thank you. As a young coach, the research is what I'm looking for, has been a huge gift. And the answer is yes, it is gold medal squared. www, all one word, goldmedalsquared.com to get the article and read some other great articles by Carl over the history and things like that. Sean has a good question that the beach guys asked, if you remember, with Mike Dodd on last Friday, Carl. How do you suggest getting a player enough digging reps by using, quote, real hitters with the hitters getting tired, etc.?
Yeah, I would like to say that Troy Tanner played volleyball for Marv Dunphy and coached with Carl McGowan, and Marv and Carl are on the same page with almost everything. And coached Misty and Carrie, and I talked to him many times as the 2008 games are getting ready to unfold, and he says, you know what, Carl, I'm coaching them just like I coached when we were coaching indoors. And so he was telling me that it's much more like coaching indoors than it is coaching just beach. The same principles apply, probably. But in any case, Mike had the best idea, don't you think, John? I thought that was just a terrific idea.
Yeah, and really what he was saying, Sean, was that he gets some of the young bucks to come down that have, both much more indefatigable arms, and he gets 3 or 4 of them, and they just, kind of go through a chain, and they just keep hitting. So I can see one being a lefty and different height players, so that you're really randomizing what you're learning as the players hit at you, but at the same time, you're not over-fatiguing some of the younger players that might be hitting. Now, I don't know. My son just got a team.
I want to have a team of beach players.
Yeah.
So I got 12 people coming to practice today, or something like that.
Yeah. A short question out of George Bottles. How does strength training fit into season training?
Yeah, that has always been of great concern to me. I know that if I get stronger, I can jump higher and hit harder. And I think an example would be Barry Bonds. He got stronger, and he hit a lot more home runs with that increased strength. Of course, we don't know if he got stronger legally, but certainly being strong helped bonds, hit more home runs. And so being strong is good, but being strong takes time. And so as the longer I coached, however, the less time we spent getting strong. And on our webpage, there's an article that we reference where they go through all of the kind of myths of weight training. And one of the myths is that you've got to do so many days a week, and you've got to do so many sets, and you've got to do so many reps. And one of the things they found is that 1 day a week is just about as good as 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And so I like to weight train. At BYU, we weight train. But when we were in season, we weight train once a week. And when we were out of season, we would go 3 times a week. You know, we would get stronger. And I think if I'm in high school, if I have to make a decision, am I going to spend an hour lifting or am I going to spend an hour serving and receiving, then it's clear to me. I'm not going to spend an hour lifting. I'm going to spend it serving and receiving. But if I can find some time where I don't get to play volleyball, but I got some time and I can get stronger, then I'm going to do that. I'm going to lift.
Shang has said, well, here's a kind of go back to Bill Howard. It's kind of an interesting question still. I've heard players say their dynamic stretching series in a couple of minutes to get mentally focused for the practice or match. It's a routine, kind of like a player's serving ritual. So, but we do try to do it on the side while waiting for the court. And, you know, I think that's a pretty interesting question, Carl, just from how do you think, what ideas in mental focus can we share that we see the national team or your BYU guys doing? What were you doing to make sure that when the 4 o'clock practice started, they were honed in and ready to go? Was there any tips there you might have?
Well, we had access to a court, even though practice hadn't started. So it depends. If you have access to a court, then one kind of activities are going to take place. And if you don't have access to a court, then any number of things could do. You know, I would vote for some of those kind of activities, those dynamic things, because I can't be on a court right now. So, but if I can be getting repetitions, then all bets are off. But at BYU, when we did have access to a court, we had pre-practice activities that the guys were involved in. They would be supervised. We supervised them, but maybe I'm still getting practice written on the whiteboard, and my coaches are supervising pre-practice activities to help ready practice, to help ready the guys for what we're going to do in practice.
Sean asked this question this way. Any suggestions when an athlete is not showing the effort towards the key point while practicing the whole skill, i.e. whole skill hitting, when an athlete's supposed to be focusing on their closing steps, their last 2 steps, but there's no effort to change the last 2 steps? I mean, that's kind of it's the cue word thing that we're working on. I mean, I remember, Sean, watching I think it was Marv actually, at a practice, focusing on one of the players who was working on their blocking outside hand movement to get it right. And he just sat by the pole, and he kept saying, "Did you do it that time? Did you do it that time?" And he was making sure that the player and he were on the same page. Now, Carl wasn't around for this one for the beach, but it was a fascinating thing that I watched happen with Peter Vint. And they brought to our Olympic beach guys were scrimmaging Czechoslovakia, and they brought a webcam down the net, and they put the computer there and put the webcam right down the net, and delayed about 20 seconds after the hit or whatever was going on, so you could come and look at it. And the beach guys would say perfect block, and then they'd come down and look at the screen, and in every case they were late. And it took that ability, even at the highest level. They thought they were timing it perfectly. They were at full extension when the ball was starting to cross the net, and they weren't, and until they saw it with their own eyes. So Jim Coleman, the late, great Jim Coleman, decade plus ago when TiVos first came out, created a way that you could replay video within about 30 seconds on a TiVo. And between that and the dartfish stuff that goes on now, I think video of showing a player so that they can see whether they've done it or not and there's 52 of these cameras at the Olympic Training Center, guys, that film every court on a delay basis, choosable by the coach on that court, or in the wrestling room or in the judo room, and they just run constantly so that whenever something happens, you and the player can turn and look at the screen and talk or see if you're on the same page. I'd say, Carl, that everybody's just saying thanks a million. It's been really, 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 really helpful, and that, Carl, you rock. And that's from Rob Hawley, who had to leave, but he wanted you to know that you rock. You should tell your wife that you rock, okay?
Yeah, if I could just convince my kids.
But I think we're going to close this out, and to Dr. McGowan, thanks more than a million for all the great ideas and research that you've given to these coaches. David says the same thing, and so Amanda says the same thing, and Floyd says he's buying lunch, and even Fred Wendable, Fred from years and years, says thanks, John and Carl. So appreciate everything. We're going to be closing the webinar off tonight, and we'll be sending you some more information after it's all over. Thanks for your attention, and Carl, thanks a million. I owe you a fly fishing trip.
Ooh, you know what? You ought to come, and we ought to go skiing this winter.
Ooh, we could do that too.
I got a good guest room too. So. All right, thank you, John.
All right, Carl. Talk to you later. Have a good night, all.